on, so it's all good. Let's begin here. So again, I want to welcome everybody for being here. All the participants. The turnout is great. We had a ton of people registered, and more people are filing in. And we look forward to present to you our topic for this year, which is mind your own bias. So today we have Yasefina and myself. And again, I just really want to welcome you to the annual celebration of Conflict Resolution Day. We request that any questions that you have happen in the Q&A. Yasefina will be monitoring that. And we're going to try and answer your questions mid presentation, so you don't have to wait to the very end. We'd love to hear from you. This is we're going to try and make this as interactive as humanly possible as well. So we really look forward to us hearing your feedback throughout.
And we already have a question, Don. So one of our attendees is asking if this recording will be made available afterwards. And yes, it will be made available on our website along with the PowerPoint, which I believe is actually already there.
Yeah, and as well, our past Conflict Resolution Day topics and trainings are on our YouTube channel as well. And we can ensure that you guys get those links. And if you go to the Conflict Resolution Day website, you'll be able to see annually all the materials, not only for this year, but for past years. So on that topic, well, what is Conflict Resolution Day? So I do want to talk about this briefly. This is an international celebration every October. It's the third Thursday in October. The Alberta Conflict Resolution Day Committee, of which both Yasefina and I are a part of this year, is part of the Alberta Dispute Resolution Network. And that network has a bunch of not-for-profits and even government resources to help us offer this, and we've been able to do this since around 2005. So this is our 17th year, and so this presentation is being offered not only across Alberta but across Canada in several different communities. And some people will be sharing this or conducting their own training, because we did a train the trainer session last month, and we're doing our very best to make sure that this material gets out there to as many people as humanly possible. So we're really looking forward to making a difference again this year. So before we begin, I would like to do our land recognition. And we chose this site here because it really does show the complexities of the territories, languages, and treaties of which we speak of. So I respectfully acknowledge that the land that I live and work on is Treaty 6 territory within the Métis homelands and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4, on the traditional and unceded territory of the many First Nations such as the Nehiyaw, Dene, Nakota Isika, Anishinaabe, and Niitsitapi. I would also like to acknowledge that this presentation may be seen across the treaties and lands from coast to coast to coast. So what is our goal here today? We're trying to use as many terms that we can agree on. So the terms that we define here, those are how we're defining those terms for the remainder. So our goal here is for you to be able to define and recognize bias in your own communication styles, learn a little bit about the science behind some of the biases, and see how it affects all of us, see how bias can be recognized in an environment, and then, of course, learn strategies and the communication tools to help minimize that impact, okay? So I guess as we get started, we have a poll right off the start, and we'd like you to answer. And so the poll, is it ready to go? Perfect.
It is.
Are you biased? Yes, no, or I don't know. Oh, I cannot vote. I didn't know that.
Well, no, Don, you're a panelist.
I'm not allowed to vote.
That was like cheating.
Is it? I guess that's my bias. There is no correct or incorrect answer, I guess.
Right.
At this point, this is just, what do you think? Do you think that you are somebody who has bias?
So I'm going to ask you, Don, since you couldn't answer in the poll, let's answer live. Do you think that you have a bias or are biased?
Oh, I'm pretty sure I'm fairly confident that I have a bias. Yeah. And I think that as we start explaining this, as we go forward, we'll be able to really take a look at the reasons why.
And can you
What
see
about
the
you?
results, Don?
What's that?
I said, can you see the results?
I cannot.
All right, so I'm going to end the poll and see if that will launch it, but 100 people of our attendees answered, 77% said yes, 5% said no, and 18% said that they didn't know. Here's the results.
Oh, there we go. I see the results now. Wow. Okay. Okay, very, very interesting. I'm really curious to see where we go, and we are going to be asking the same poll at a different point. But I guess let's begin right now. How are we going to be defining bias for the purpose of this presentation? Well, bias is a tendency, inclination, or a prejudice towards or against something or someone. Some biases can be positive and helpful, like choosing to only eat foods that are healthy or staying away from someone that you knowingly causes harm. But biases are often based also on stereotypes rather than the actual knowledge of an individual or a circumstance. Whether positive or negative, such cognitive shortcuts can result in prejudgments that lead to rash decisions or sometimes even discriminatory practices. So right now we're going to start taking a look at the science behind and the environmental recognition of biases. Where do they come from? What are they? We're going to start with cognitive bias. Now, cognitive bias is a way of thinking about and perceiving the world that may not necessarily reflect reality. Now, we each have a sort of cognitive bias based, regardless of our age, our gender, our race, or even our level of education. These are universal. Right? There are dozens of cognitive biases that have been identified, and we'll kind of take a look a little bit into the complexity behind that. But these biases can also impact our judgment. Our decision-making can be significantly impacted. And again, like we said, either for the positive or for the negative. So let's take a look at some of the complexity that we have here. And this website or this link is fantastic. And we are going to share it with you. And you can see how it's broken down. So this is the Cognitive Bias Codex. And you can see each one of these little fingers here, or flowers, result in one type of cognitive bias. So if I was to, let's say, click on confirmation bias, it would take me down this rabbit hole that I could start taking a look and educating myself on what is a confirmation bias. And there's quite a bit of information, as you can see. And that's only one. And you can see how it's broken down from too much information to need to act fast, what should we remember, and what has meaning or not enough meaning. We've chosen a select few for the purposes of this presentation, and we're going to start with heuristics. Now, what is heuristics? Before we did this, this is a term I never studied before, but and it makes sense though. It's an approach to problem solving or self-discovery that employs a practical method that is not necessarily perfect, but it's sufficient for reaching an immediate goal, right? So this tendency has evolved really to help us save energy while perceiving our environment. Right? We can't always take a look at everything. And we have a video shortly that will kind of explain that a little bit more. Heuristics allows us to sort through a ton of information and retrieve our memories that help us make decisions very, very quickly. So these are prone to error from cognitive, social, and biological sources. They're influenced by our experiences. Okay, so let's take a look at the video here, and we'll have a better explanation.
Every day you make decisions and judgments. Sometimes you're able to think about them carefully, but other times you make them on the fly using little information. This is where heuristics come in. Heuristics are straightforward rules of thumb that we develop based on our past experiences. They're cognitive tools that help us make quick decisions or judgments. Life would be exhausting if we had to deliberate over every one of the hundreds of choices we make every day. So instead, we use our heuristics as shortcuts to make judgments about the world around us.
Whoops.
For example, rather than spending time deciding what to wear every day, you might have some default outfits. Or when faced with a lunch menu with too many options, you may opt for what you've enjoyed in the past. Heuristics aren't about making the perfect decision or judgment, just about making one quickly. Heuristics play a role in our reasoning about the broader world, too. As an example, consider the rate of violence in the world over the past century. Is the world more or less violent in the past 20 years than previous? Heuristic reasoning might lead us to think that the world is more violent today than it has been in the past. Every day, we're confronted with images of tragedy in the news and on social media. We might reasonably assume that the world is more violent today than ever before using what's called an availability heuristic. That is, examples of violence that are so readily available, we just naturally assume the world is more violent today. But in fact, the world is more peaceful today than ever before in human history. We may hear a lot about violent events, but in terms of raw numbers, fewer people die today at the hands of other human beings than ever before. So that heuristic about how violent the world is incorrect. In fact, a slew of other heuristics can easily lead us to mistaken conclusions. And it doesn't matter how smart or well-educated you are. Anyone can place too much trust in the mental shortcuts they use to make sense of the world. Take this example. Let's say a person tests positive for a rare disease, one that only 1 in 1,000 people have. What is the likelihood that he actually has the disease? Most of us would say the likelihood is very high based on the test results alone. But what if the results were inaccurate 10% of the time? If the false positive rate is 10%, a common number in medical tests, then it is highly unlikely our patient has the disease. In fact, based on the prevalence of the disease and the test result, we can be 99% sure he doesn't have the disease. This is because the odds of getting a false positive result, 1 in 10, are much higher than the odds of actually having the disease, 1 in 1,000. But in multiple studies, physicians routinely get this wrong, overestimating the likelihood that their patient actually has the disease. Psychologists call this the representativeness heuristic. People assume an individual case is more representative than it actually is. Our political views can especially suffer from an over-reliance on heuristics. Just consider how we deal with political issues. We'll often let our political identities and our heuristics about how right we think they are stand in lieu of important details and information we need to have an informed viewpoint. Because our heuristics can so easily lead us to faulty conclusions, it's important to be humble about our views. In light of our fallibility, we have to do something that doesn't come easy. We must recognize that the world is an uncertain place and that our judgments about it are often wrong. We ought to listen to opinions we may initially consider wrong or even offensive. Our intuitions are useful, even necessary when it comes to making quick judgments about the world, but that doesn't mean they're correct. Recognizing the flawed nature of your thinking is a bold first step to challenging it.
I think the important part of that is how outside influences like media or people that we respect influence or can influence our bias, right? An aspect of heuristics or the availability, one aspect that we're going to talk about, the availability heuristic, is how influenced we are by something that we saw. So the availability heuristic, it shows, you know, for example, in this, as what you're seeing here, if we start seeing Jaws and then a bunch of shark attacks on the news, the next time we go to the beach, we're going to be way more fearful than statistics would show around a shark attack, right? That's why companies try and associate sometimes their products with an emotionally charged marketing campaign. For example, recently, there was Dove's Keep the Gray campaign regarding Lisa LaFlamme's exit from CTV News. It's about something that is out there that is now influencing us. Now, if we take that a step further, we can even get into the anchoring effect. Okay, so if there is a mug that you see for $300, you're like, oh my God, I'll never spend $300 on a mug. But then you turn the corner and then you see, you see the mug for $1,000. You're like, oh my God, I'll never get that mug for $1,000. That's insane. But then you turn the corner and then you see it's on sale for $300. You now are thinking to yourself that you've just saved $700. Not that you are spending $300 way more than what you need to spend, right? Think about it from another perspective. When you buy something online, are you more likely to buy something with a 5-star review than something with a 1-star review. Those are all influences that anchor our belief into something being of good value or of not of good value. Right? And we can start seeing how people can also in our communication start making us believe that something is true or not. And I just wish there was an example over the last 2.5 years that I could kind of come up with. And nothing comes to mind, but we'll just move on. This cartoon here on cognitive dissonance is my favorite thing. It shows a heart running towards reality and then zipping by it just to get to anything else, right? We don't want to deal with the reality of a situation. So cognitive dissonance is how we deal with and then reject contradictory ideas, right? There's that statement, facts don't care about your feelings. While that may be true, facts also almost never win an argument. Right? If you start taking a look at something that happened, I don't know, about 10 years ago, the birther movement in the United States, where they said that Barack Obama was not born in the United States. And so we need to see his birth certificate. When his birth certificate was shown, it actually showed that it actually proved to people that he was in fact not born there, even though his birth certificate said the same. Another example is Galileo, right? Galileo came out and showed a time when the church held a lot of political power, and he showed that the earth actually wasn't the center of the universe and it revolved around the sun like all the other planets. That was so rejected by everybody, even though there was scientific proof for it. He actually was jailed and had to recant. So think about a time when you outright rejected an idea based on your first gut reaction to it, regardless if it was scientific or if it was factual. Okay. So what we're looking for is the confirmation bias. We might have facts, but we don't take a look at all the facts. We take a look at the facts that really support our prejudged beliefs, our prejudices. When there is a fact that could even be taken out of context that supports what we believed before, then we use that as facts. And that's why we really sometimes have a problem with our communication, because somebody might be talking about something from the same page, but it's outside of that comfort zone of our beliefs. So confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and then focus on and remember information that confirms one's preconceptions. Okay. So now we can start going down a little bit more. Like there's the backfire effect, where if somebody shows you evidence that disconfirms your prejudice, you actually strengthen your prejudice or your preconception. There's an expectation bias, that the tendency sometimes, this is for an experimenter, where they really believe that something before they go through the scientific method. They want an outcome to occur. And so what happens is they believe, certify, and publish data that agree with their expectations for the outcome of the experiment, and then disbelieve or discard or even downgrade the corresponding weighting for data that appear to conflict with their pre-expectations. There's other aspects that we can go down, like the Semmelweis reflex. It's the tendency just to reject new evidence that contradicts a paradigm, something that we agree to. And again, I just wish that there was something over the last couple of years that we could really focus on that some people had. And I just blank. The egocentric bias is it's fantastic. It's a fantastic element to really explore.
This one really speaks to you, doesn't it, Don?
Well, I mean, the first word does. No, the egocentric bias is a tendency. Really, what it is, it's the adverse. It's the antithesis of empathy, right? What it really is it says let's say I'm really good at math, and Yasefina, you're not as good at math. So I can't understand why you don't know how to do this simple math equation for me. So I believe, because of the egocentric bias, that I am smarter than you. but then I discount all the gifts that you have in social settings, in language arts, and all these in other artistic abilities that I don't have, but I just completely dismiss that. That's the egocentric bias. And again, what it is it's the exact antithesis of empathy. Empathy is feeling with people in a moment. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad at something. We really discussed that in last year's training, kindness and communication. So I would recommend, if anybody has further questions about that, to take a look. The truth is we all have special talents. Sometimes it's difficult to imagine that someone else just might struggle in the areas that we're gifted in, or the areas that we work really hard in. Another aspect of egocentric bias is that it lets us believe that other people hold the same preferences and values that we do. There was this old joke, you know, you gauge somebody else's intelligence by how much they agree with you. That's a certain part of the egocentric bias. Another aspect of it, especially in communication or conflict, when things escalate between two people, is the egocentric bias can sometimes cause us to evaluate the fairness of a situation as it favors ourselves or disfavors ourselves. That's really where the egocentric bias really comes to a loggerhead when it comes to communication with people that are important to us. We're going to discuss another one, implicit bias. We have a great video for this. We'll show you in a second. Much of our social behavior, this is actually a quote by Grewald and Banaji, that much of our social behavior is driven by learned stereotypes that operate automatically and therefore unconsciously when we interact with other people. The attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. That's what we're talking about. And I'd love to be able to show you this video now. Conan O'Brien.
Many of you probably heard the big news about the Boy Scouts. This is a big story. Last week, the organization decided to allow girls to join, and they officially changed their name to just Scouts. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people have opinions about this, and they're wondering if making the organization co-ed is a good idea. We haven't talked about it yet. What do you think, Andy?
Well, I don't want to sway anyone's opinion, but I did get my hands on some footage from the co-ed scout camp. I think a lot of you will find it very troubling. Take a look.
Which one of you did this?
Hi, I'm Andy Richter, and I'm here to talk to you about implicit bias. If you watch that clip and assume the owner of the curling iron would be a girl, then you just showed implicit bias. Something to think about. Okay, I think we got it. Let's give it up for my camera operator, Sam. Hi, me again. If you see my camera operator, Sam, was a man, you've once again shown implicit bias. Check your bias. Okay, guys, we're really done now. I have to take my car to the mechanic. It's a woman, damn it, people. This is exhausting. I'm spending the rest of my day fighting against gender inequality.
Hi, I'm Conan O'Brien. And if you really thought Andy was going to spend the afternoon on activism instead of taking his usual nap, then you just showed implicit bias.
Hi, I'm Andy Richter, and if you thought Conan wasn't going to be a grade A douchebag about this, then you showed implicit bias.
Hi, I'm Conan O'Brien. But if you thought Andy wasn't going to get way too emotional and overreact to my teasing, then you...
Hi, I'm Andy Richter. If you thought this sketch was better before Conan inserted himself into it, then you should.
Hi, I'm Conan O'Brien. And I'm sorry, but the last time I checked, the show's called Conan.
Hi, I'm Conan O'Brien.
Damn it. You're so sensitive.
Because you're always undermining me.
Hi, I'm Conan O'Brien. And I'm here to promote the new season of Arrested Development, available May 29th on Netflix. That's it. This whole thing is getting around for marketing. If you thought it was a comedy sketch, then you've just shown implicit bias.
Such a good video, right, Don?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
And-
me
and
too.
Whenever we can discuss something, a high concept, and just be able to make it more relatable. And I'm talking about for me. I'm not talking about for others. I've used, since we came up, or since this material was put together, I now see things in a different way, right? And one term especially, and it's a really good segue into where we are right now. How do we know when we've been activated by some of these biases? Some of the symptoms of these biases are like unconscious or implicit, and we aren't always aware that we may have behaved in a prejudicial or biased manner. And that's really important, because there's a term that I didn't understand before I saw this material, and that is microaggressions. Now, I thought, full disclosure, I thought microaggressions, when I first heard it, was something that was just kind of made up on college campuses. I didn't really understand it. And now I really appreciate that I have an understanding to what microaggressions are. Now, what they are, and as they're defined, is they are subtle acts. They are brief and very commonplace, daily. They can be intentional or unintentional. Mostly they're unintentional in the term of how we're discussing it, where there's that implicit bias and those biases that we have from our experiences. But never,
One of the examples that I can give that I've experienced in this area, Don, is in fact, just looking at my name. Your name is hard to pronounce. Can I call you something else instead? Right. Have you experienced that one, Don?
well, actually, I have so much that I actually changed my name. Now, a lot of you may not know this, but my name isn't Don. Don is a name I came up with when moving to central Alberta, because my legal name is actually spelled D-R-O-R. And I'm not going to have anybody try and pronounce that, because they're all going to mess it up. But in my language, it's pronounced Drôle. Really cool name. In English, drawer just doesn't cut it. So I went with Don, just to avoid some of those microaggressions. And it's how I felt at the time, right? Whether or not it was the intent of anybody, it's an uncommon name here. So there's no intent behind it, but it's still sometimes communicated hostile or derogatory slights against somebody, right? Yes, like we know there might not be intent, but it does make people feel secluded. So or not part of the group. So we have a video right now, and we are going to put a little disclaimer ahead of it. This may trigger some of you, so be prepared. If you want to put your camera on mute over the next few couple of minutes, you can certainly do that. But this video really articulates well what a microaggression is. But again, just be aware, full disclosure, that this could trigger.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem, oh, you're so well spoken. Oh, just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite. Ugh, it's a compliment. Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while, where are you really from?
Cleveland.
Sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date.
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me? Going grocery shopping. Everything happens for a reason.
I'm just saying. Yeah.
Commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins name, part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner. I couldn't even tell you were gay. Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
John? Shopping is so
I'm here too. And getting bit by mosquitoes every day,
Touch your hair.
multiple times a day,
Can I touch it?
it's annoying. That makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite. Who cares? Just another angry black woman.
course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years. Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major. And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
It looked like he was up to trouble, okay? I felt threatened.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time. You're all so exotic, wow. And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
So as you can see and here in the video, there's many examples of microaggressions. Maybe you can even recognize some of the examples, even though you did not intend to cause harm. Remember, implicit bias means that we are unconscious about our biases, and therefore we can easily carry out microaggressions, even though we're not intending to hurt. So what happens? What happens in those situations when you're triggered? Well, you know, I'm sure that many of you have heard of fight or flight, right? You either attack the threat or you escape the threat. But we also want to talk about freeze and fawn, right? Where you freeze, where you just avoid provoking the threat, or fawn, you placate the threat. And I think that that's one of my go-tos when I was younger. I would fawn, I would placate the threat. I would choose to laugh along. Then if I'm laughing with, then I'm not being laughed at. But it didn't remove the feeling of being left out, right? And so we can start taking a look at how easy it is to react in a way. And if you see somebody get upset, you see somebody take a flight, freeze, fawn approach, you can start taking a look at the impact you may have had, even though it was not your intent. We're not attributing blame. We're attributing accountability. We don't know the impact, according to the microaggression, according to implicit bias. We might not know the impact of something we said, but we can see the impact. And therefore, we can take that accountability and say, oh, wow, I learned something. I won't use that type of language again. And that way, that strengthens the connection between two people. Because at the end of the day, we just have alternate points of view. This is a perfect example, this picture right here. You know, one person sees an M, one person sees a W. No one is wrong. No one is wrong. Even the artist's intent to draw an M or a W doesn't matter based on the perspective and where they're at with the information that they have. Right? So we need to seek alternate points of view. If we always, if we can find a way to push the problem away from in between us to a common point, we're now looking at something from the same perspective. And they, in this example, they would see the M and the W on the exact same way. So we need to critically think. We need to be rational, right? We need to be responsive instead of reactive, right? A reaction is an emotional reaction, right? A response is thoughtful. And so you're able to think through. Because the truth is, great communication begins with connection. And great connection comes from good communication. That's how we make our bids for connection. It's only through our communication, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. It could be in the in how we ask questions, what statements that we make to them and about them, nonverbal gestures, glances, touches. It could be a bunch of different things. When Safina and I are talking, you know, you want to be sure you're turning towards somebody. You want to act in that interested, positive, loving, connected way, right? When you turn towards them, you reach out, touch them, look at them. Nod, smile, wink, all those verbal and nonverbal cues. And then you could say, I hear you. I want to help you. I'm interested in you. You can ask questions. You want to avoid turning away, because if you're turned away, even just me sitting like this, it shows I'm disinterested in the topic that I'm talking about. It's about making that connection. If you wander away, if you show that you're not with somebody, then they feel that you're almost against them. So we want to avoid turning against people, right? So here, what we're going to do now is we're going to start discussing some of the skills. Now we're going to build it up because the first couple are more centered towards things we can tell our children, especially when they're triggered. But this first one is, there's a really good story behind this. When I was in the military, because I had heard about, breathe in a box, right? You breathe in, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out, hold it for 4 seconds, and so forth. And I always like, there's got to be something better. And when I was in the military, my sergeant told me, what we have to practice to regulate ourselves is tactical breathing. And I was like, oh, tactical breathing, that sounds awesome. What is that? And he goes, you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, then you breathe out for 4 seconds and repeat. And I was like, well, I guess it's just a common thread. And it's amazing how it helps regulate our emotions. It helps us be thoughtful. It is a physical change that occurs that allows us to be thoughtful. Now, with kids, sometimes they need a little bit more. And so there's a great grounding technique that we can do with kids. Name 5 things that you can see. And they're emotional. So you got to look around. You got to start focusing on your surroundings. All right, now, what are 4 things that you can touch? Your knee, your nose, the table. What are 3 things that you can hear? 2 things you can smell. What is 1 thing you can taste? And it really takes them out of the emotional moment of something. So they're not reacting. They're now able to respond. And then from there, we can start taking a look at physical activities, right? Because doing something physical recenters the brain. Your body, your brain is commanding your body to an action of focus, whether it's to carry something, read a book, jump on a trampoline, run, pull, right? All these different things, they help us return to baseline thinking. Okay, so to try, we're going to do a little experiment with all our participants here. So there's a statement here. There are 7 words here. I never said she stole my money. Now, based on the rules of the language arts and grammar, one of these words should be emphasized. So we're going to run a poll here. And I want you to choose the word that should be emphasized so this sentence is correct. And we'll give you guys a couple of minutes, or not a couple of minutes, but a couple of moments, I should say, to answer this. And give it your best guess if you're not 100% sure. But there is a right answer here.
And our polls are anonymous, and so we won't know what answer you have chosen.
As we kind of get through this, the first time I did this, I'll let you guys know which word I thought it was. But it's kind of neat what we're going to be doing here. This is a focus on something that happens every day, if we think about it from a certain perspective. And how many answers have we got? We got quite a few, or still people being hesitant?
It's still growing. We're continuously growing. We're at 69%, Don. Once it stops increasing. There we go. I think we'll stop here. 69%.
So let's take a look. Okay, wow, there's a fairly even distribution here. So the majority of people think it's never. Some people thinks it's stole, but there's a good distribution. At least one person chose every single word here. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I guess the truth is, I kind of set everybody up. There is no one right answer, because the truth is, depending on which word you emphasize here, it means 7 entirely different things. I'll prove it to you. I never said she stole my money. It was them who said it. I never said she stole my money. It's just a lie. I never said she stole my money. It wasn't said, it was implied. I never said she stole my money. It wasn't her, it was them. I never said she stole my money. It wasn't stolen, it was given. I never said she stole my money. It wasn't my money that was stolen, it was theirs. And I never said she stole my money. It wasn't it wasn't the money, it was my whole wallet that was stolen. So when we consider that, we might emphasize a different word than is the intent. So if somebody very important to me, Yas, comes to me and says, I never said she stole my money. And I said to Yas, well, I'm going to go find her and get your money back. Was I a good listener? My intent was good. My intent was good. But I based everything that I know about that statement, about my desire to protect and be there for Yasefina. And then I used my bias to be able to move forward with the limited amount of information that I had.
This is especially important in the digital world, isn't it, Dawn? Because
yeah.
when we're texting each other or we're emailing each other, it's challenging to know what context the writer is placing emphasis on.
Right. And there's a wonderful, which we couldn't show just for the amount of language that's in it, but there's a if you're not opposed to seeing something with a lot of swearing, Key and Peele have a wonderful short video on text messages when we emphasize the wrong words. And how it could really change the intent. Something friendly could sound hostile. So that's something that we really want to take a look at. So right now we want to do the poll again that we started off with. Are you biased? Do you believe that you've learned something? Do you believe that things have changed? Or is it the same distribution that we had as before?
And there's a two parts to this question now, Dawn. We're asking, are you
Okay.
biased? And if yes, do you know your bias or biases?
Amazing. I think this is where I know it's my intent to not make somebody feel excluded. But throughout learning this material, I guess I've learned I have the capacity to do so regardless of my intent.
Okay, we have about it's still growing. So we have about 70% participation. It is still growing. I will say today, if you do not know what your biases are, the intent of today's presentation, Dawn, do you want to talk about that? For those who will say that they don't know their bias yet.
It's start going down that rabbit hole. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about now it's start exploring all this information. Right? That's what the intent is. The intent is now to maybe go down that rabbit hole and start figuring out how some of those biases may actually impact your communication. And the results of the poll came out, right? There was, we're up to 94% of people recognizing that, yes, they are biased. And again, not trying to be. 54% of you can actually recognize which bias. That's amazing. And at certain situations, it might change. So now we want to walk through tools of if you recognize that you have the potential to be biased, how do we move forward? Well, what we try to do is we really need to seek those alternative points of view. The unfamiliar may be the best pathway forward. Now we're going to give you guys, you folks, some tools to use here. Okay. Now, you're going to be very bad at using those tools because it's the first time you may have heard them. This takes a different way of communicating. You've had your whole life of communicating a certain way, and to do something different takes time, effort, and it's a struggle, right? Just like learning any sport, you're training your brain to do something different. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to start taking a look at, all right, if we see people are upset, there's a fight or flight, fawn, freeze situation going on. What do I need to know about the situation? What is my frame of reference on this topic or subject matter? What am I trying to achieve in this conversation? That's a great question. If you're arguing with somebody, what am I actually trying to achieve here? Do I need this person to agree with me? Why do I need this person to agree with me? Am I receiving information that I did not receive before? I love being proven wrong because it means I'm growing, I'm expanding, I'm learning something new. And Yasefina does that to me all the time, always. It's fantastic. But how do we do this? the I statement is the best beginner resource because there's a rule with an I statement. I am not allowed to use the word you. This and this alone, this I statement will help your communication with loved ones and colleagues immeasurably. Because what we're doing, we're avoiding the word you altogether. So it makes us have to eliminate that word from our speech. So, for example, when a person feels that they're blamed, rightly or wrongly, it's common that they respond with defensiveness, right? So I statements are a simple way of speaking that helps you avoid this trap by reducing feelings of blame. A good I statement, basically what it does is it forces empathy on the other person for you, right? How it's constructed, really, really easy. I feel, and then you add that emotion word, I feel angry, or I feel hurt, or I feel worried, right?
So if we went through some example scenarios, Don, let's say you and I are working on a committee together and you feel like I'm not pulling my share of the work or completing my share of the work. You've repeatedly had to ask me to finish my work. How would you turn this into an I statement, Don?
That's a really good question because it's the truth is almost the exact opposite. But I'll give it my best. I'll try to remember what you said to me. I feel unappreciated when the project isn't. We don't commit to our timelines. What I need is for us to come to agreement on this and be able to find a way forward. Well, what I did is instead of you didn't do your half, we created a team game out of a situation that sometimes feels like it could be versus. Instead of something being me against you, it's now a we. And you could see how that impact would change. You hurt my feelings, okay? That can cause escalation. I was hurt. I felt hurt when voices were raised. It made me feel unheard. What I need is for us to keep our tone respectful.
What about those friends, for example, who always cancel plans at the last minute? And let's say I was waiting at a restaurant for them, and then all of a sudden they called to say they couldn't make it. How could that be turned into an I statement?
Right. Yeah. And that's a great one, right? And the example for blaming is, you keep coming late, or you always cancel the plans. You're making me feel like, you, that's the blaming, right? I feel hurt when plans are canceled in the last minute. It makes me afraid that you don't care. Or
I feel frustrated.
Or I feel frustrated, or I'm afraid that I'm not cared for. I'm afraid that I'm not respected. Right? When we start talking about that vulnerability piece, it becomes really powerful.
And I see one of our audience members has typed in a question that one of the biggest issues they run into as mediator is, and I'm going to put this in quotes now, when they are with clients, what they hear one of the clients saying is, "You are not listening to me," usually between partners or domestic couples.
Right. And that's,
have you seen this as an I statement reframe, Don?
Absolutely. And this is where, as mediators, we learn this. And anybody who's not a mediator, this next slide really starts giving people a formula, a model of which they can go on with. So if somebody says, "You're not listening to me," okay, let's start talking about the desk model. A, describe what you are seeing, hearing, or the situation. When I hear, when I see, when I'm not listened to. Okay, so now we've described what the situation is. Let's move into express. You express your response, what is going on for you emotionally. What happens to you when you don't feel you're listened to? So when I'm not listened to, I feel frustrated. Okay, that's the emotion word that we're going to use. So now let's get specific. State your preferred need. What do you need? I would appreciate if what? If I was heard or if I was acknowledged. We don't necessarily have to come to agreement, but I would feel, it would make me feel better if I felt heard, or if I felt acknowledged, or if I wasn't interrupted. We can start getting very, very specific. And then the consequence of that is, if what I described and expressed, and we came up with that specific, if I wasn't interrupted, that way we could feel the temperature in the room could be lower. We could feel like we're working here for each other. So when we describe, express and express how we're feeling specifically about something and what a possible solution is, the consequence, now consequence isn't a bad word. There's not, there's a good consequence and a bad consequence. A good consequence of something is, if you study for a test, you're going to do well on the test. If you don't study for the test, the consequence is you'll probably do pretty bad on that test. And then you do the follow-ups, right? What have we agreed to? What is my responsibility and what is your responsibility? And then we move on to the next sentence. As a mediator, what we're trying to do is slow the communication down into clarity, to describe that needs-focused reality, not the position. This really helps get into those underlying needs. And that's something to practice again and again and again. And there's a ton of material, and this slide, like we said, is going to be available. I'm just very conscious for time, and I want to get to the last video as well, because it's a great way to end this off. But we also have to realize there's a difference between what somebody perceives and what somebody intends. I may not intend to hurt you. You perceived it as hurtful. That's a reality for both sides. I can choose to not be offended that my intention was perceived that way, and start focusing on realizing the steps I need to change in order to ensure you don't perceive my actions that way. That's an accountability that I can have.
And Donna, I'll just pipe in, not related to the subject matter, but just in terms of your comment on time, we have until 1:30 for this presentation.
Oh, okay, fantastic. There's a really cool story here about perception and intention, and there's this situation that's written here, and it's, Mom always used to cut the end of the ham whenever she put it in the oven and cooked it. And so when asked, Mom would say, well, my mom always did that, so that's the way I learned to cook the ham from her. So when we go to Grandma and we ask, well, Grandma, why did you cut the ends off the ham? Grandma says, well, I just cut off the ends of the ham because my pan was too small to fit the whole ham. So sometimes we do things without realizing the why. So when we can start understanding why we're doing something, we can get into understanding our own bias, right? We can take a moment to think about the things that we admire in somebody else, not the things that we don't relate to, whether it's age, whether it's, whatever it may be, their gender, their race. What do we admire in them? That way we can take a step back, refocus, take a look at what we have said, the impact of what we could have said, and then we can understand that by taking a walk in their shoes. We then use active, interactive listening skills, right? We make sure that we're facing them, using verbal, nonverbal cues. We're nodding. We're asking the right questions, I statements, and then if things get escalated, we always can move back to desk. It's about creating understanding and community. And this next slide here does a really good job of showing us some of those things. Now, there's a couple of questions here that are a little bit more adult themed as a disclaimer, but overall we felt this was safe enough for showing in this setting.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us. And there's them. The high earners. And those just getting by. Those we trust.
Yeah, that's right.
And those we try to avoid. There's the New Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
What I love about that video is when we look for it, connection is all around us in everything. We might have some people here that unfortunately cheer for the Edmonton Oilers. And I can't help either, as I am a huge Calgary Flames fan. But that's what separates us. Do we love hockey? That's what brings us together. And there is an opportunity for that connection everywhere. Sometimes at a party, we take a look for the people that we might recognize or the people that we might have something in common with. But if we were to go to a stranger and start up that conversation, learning what connects us is such a powerful tool. And when we start being able to take a look at all those things that disconnect us, that cause conflict, there's such overall, more than anything else that we've talked about, there is a tool that's out there that is the most helpful thing, and it's forgiveness. Forgiveness becomes so much easier when we realize that some of these things that might have triggered us or caused a communication breakdown occurred because of a bias, sometimes even unconscious bias. And we can, without blame, bring people back into our little circles of community. Nelson Mandela, and I love this quote, "Forgiveness liberates the soul, it removes fear." That's why it's such a powerful weapon. This is a pro-social behavior in which the victim replaces ill will towards the wrongdoer with goodwill. think of how if we just change that perception that I was wrong, yes, but they're still a good person. And I can create a different communication standard to ensure this doesn't happen again, and they get all that good stuff. And learning, it's beneficial for mental health, physical health, social well-being. It's been associated with superior health outcomes, including cardiovascular health. There was a study done that people who suffered from lower back pain actually felt lower levels of pain when they were in a forgiving state. It's been found to have to be associated with a reduction in negative emotions, and it reduces anxiety, anger, grief. I recall one of the most powerful examples of forgiveness I had ever seen. And there was the Tabor, right after Columbine school shooting. It was just shortly after, I don't recall exactly when, about a month, 2 months after that, there was a school shooting in Tabor, Alberta. And one child was murdered in that shooting. And his father was a minister. And they interviewed him almost immediately after he found out his son died. And they asked him how he felt. And he said immediately that he forgives the shooter. I found that to be so incredibly powerful. That ability to still see the good in the world. And that is something that I just wish I have the strength as I go forward, and learning all of these materials, learning the science behind it, and learning that there are actions that I can take to move forward, make it such I'm more relieved. What we'd like to hear now is questions from you. Obviously, we have a feedback survey that we'd like you all to complete. This is the feedback is so incredibly important because it helps us develop the materials for future conflict resolution day. So this just show your QR code, just put your phone right up there. It takes about 30 seconds. We don't ask a ton of questions for the material about the material we got today. The evaluations, like I said, they continuously allow us to improve the sessions. We did a train the trainer back in mid-September, and we got feedback, and we changed some of the slides in this presentation because of that feedback. That's how important it is to us. If you're also interested in being a part of Conflict Resolution Day, our committee, we're always looking for volunteers. It's fantastic. This year is my last year as co-chair, but Yasafina and I were co-chairs this year, and it's just been an incredible past couple of years as being co-chair, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with next year. Yes, we do have some links here. And these presentations can also be altered, right? So if you would like to do this presentation, we do have on our YouTube channel, the Train the Trainer, all the slides there, some interactive tools for you to use. You can add your own organization or website right here. You can go to the conflictresolutionday.ca website, or again, the Alberta Dispute Resolution Network to learn more. Again, this presentation is going to be made available. And I do want to thank you for participating so far in Conflict Resolution Day. And now we have just a bunch of time relegated to some Q&A. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, or just shareables, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear also about your experiences. Was there a microaggression that you had to deal with, but you dealt with in a positive manner? How did you deal with some of these situations? How important has forgiveness been to you in your life? We'd love to be able to hear from you.
So Don, I'm going to ask you to go back to the slide with the QR code, as some of our attendees missed it. And there is a comment to you in the chat box that's to you personally, so make sure you check that. And then if you recall, we had a worksheet that is available to some attendees on our website that has examples of statements and biases. And so I'm going to put a statement to you, and you tell me what bias you think it is. I am promoting Manuel to the role of director. He thinks a lot like I do, and I can see his career trajectory as being very successful. Any thoughts, Don?
Sorry, I was reading the thing. I missed your question because I did miss something, and it was just noted here. And so I'll let you repeat the question.
Okay, so what bias is this statement reflect? I am promoting Manuel to that role of director. He thinks a lot like I do, and I can see his career trajectory as being very successful.
Well, that's almost like the opposite of a like if you're saying that to me, right? So that could also
What bias am I reflecting?
well, number one, that could be a microaggression.
Yeah.
Right, because now it's excluding. It could exclude me because of a variety of different factors. Egocentric bias is another bias, right? If we think alike, therefore, we start looking at it from that way. And then there's also confirmation bias, right? So there's a bunch of different elements that could fit within that scope. Right, he agrees with me on the things that I find important. Therefore, the things that he might disagree with me that I don't find important.
Or similarity bias.
Right.
Right. We have a lot of similar aspects, and so we must think alike.
Right. There is something else that I want to share with everybody, and we have the link, and I think that we can share that link to the Harvard implicit bias test, which is
it has been shared.
It has been shared, yeah, and it's fantastic. I did this test, I think it was like 15 years ago, the first time I saw it, and I always considered myself at that time, especially, I'm not biased towards anybody, and it's amazing the results that you get, because it shows, my intent again is not to hurt or harm. Neither is any one of yours. However, when we get into that implicit unconscious aspect of ourselves, of how we grew up, where we grew up, and what we learned during those times, what the news shows us, all these external factors come into play. But the good news is the more that we face some of these, and the more we discuss some of these, that's where change happens.
So I'm going to put another statement to you. No way am I taking that drug. It gave my friend a blood clot.
Right. And what is that one called? That's the shoot, now my mind's running, but you're putting me on the spot here. Safina. No, so that one is the heuristic, right? The heuristic, the availability heuristic. Right.
Right.
I was for something ergonomic was in my head, and I knew that wasn't right.
We knew that wasn't right. Okay, I'll give you an easy one. I'm really not good at math. I am really good at math. Sorry. I do not understand why Dawn is not. I must be smarter than Dawn.
This is true. But we'll go with egocentric bias on that one.
The part of me being good at math is not true, actually.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's where we can start taking a look, and if we start removing some of these biases, right? Like what we're talking about here isn't pie in the sky, right? We're not just these eternal optimists who believe the whole world can be this way if they choose to. This is reality. If we're conscious of these biases and we take steps to avoid them or learn from them, well, then guess what? We strengthen our communication, our relationships. Like that I statement aspect alone, if you use that in times of escalation or when you're triggered, whether it's through a microaggression, whether it's through, a state, like anything really threatening, it can help, right? Because our brains don't differentiate between physical violence and verbal. It doesn't differentiate. That's why we react sometimes so viscerally when somebody disagrees with us, right? Think about politically. I just wish, again, there was just, in Canada or the United States, opposing political polarization that I could speak to. But again, I can't think of a single thing. But
there's so many we could choose from. It's hard to choose just one.
Right. But when you start naming a group of people and start identifying people by a name, which is now a slur, you can discount anything else that they're saying. If in the States, you could say, oh, well, you're just a Democrat, or you're just a,
Exactly.
right? Or in Canada, you're an anti-vaxxer. Well, get to know me, right? Maybe there's many opinions that we actually share. By using a common word as a slur, you're able to discount them and lump them into the stereotyped group. And then we don't have to get into conversation or discourse. Because conversation and learning something new is incredibly difficult.
You know, I have to say there's a good tip from one of our attendees who said a good hint to think about some of these biases like egocentric is the use of the word I. I am better at you in math. I must be smarter than you.
Right. 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 And it's interesting that where we can take this is, you know, if we start teaching this in schools, because, you know, I always used to joke when you know, through the peer mediation skills training organization, PMAST, we were able to work over a couple of years in a high school. Because one of the things that they don't teach you in high school, I guess two of the things that we used to joke about they don't teach you in high school is healthy communication and relationships, number one, and number two, how to do your taxes. That we kind of joked about that. But it was through the PMAST organization and what we did with the Rocky View school district, you could see the difference in how many kids received suspensions or expulsions, or what the grades of people who missed a lot of school, and how their attendance actually increased. You know, when you start putting that focus on proper communication, and again, the focus was, let's start easy, I statements, and then move into desk. And I think that right now it's good to put up that last slide on desk as a reminder to people that this is as easy as it is. Use an I statement to describe what you're seeing. Use an I statement, use the I words. You're not allowed to use the word you to express your emotion. Describe what you're seeing, hearing, or the situation, express the emotion, and then state your specific need. When I hear, I feel, I would need.
Speaking of the desk model, we have a really good question that's just come up. Do you have tips or resources for teaching the desk model to children?
Yeah, and I think that the best way when we start taking a look at how to teach, because there's no blanket statement on that, right? This is how does your child learn? That's the first question that you have to ask. Is it, you know, we learn through a bunch of different ways. Is it through touching? Like, do we have to click on things? Do we write them out? Do we have to hear it? Do we see videos on it? Because there's multiple resources. A great place to access resources for training is the ADR Institute of Alberta. They have a ton of training for all the way from understanding what conflict is into some specific tips and tools on how to address it. When I discussed this with our kids, it was, you know, writing it down, right? Color coded. So how do we describe what we are seeing? Right? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be when conflict is here. Right? This doesn't have to be when something bad happens. So desk can be a card game, right? All right, so you do a D. All right, what am I saying? I am seeing the trees drive by. I see a white barn. How does it make you feel? Oh, I feel that's pretty cool. I feel happy seeing that. Right? What is your need? I'd like to keep going. It could be as easy as that. It doesn't sometimes, and I think that this is where communications training, this works especially well when we are triggered, because it helps regulate us. But if we start using it in all walks of our personal and professional lives, it now starts becoming habitual. And the more habitual it becomes, the easier it is to pull that card out, the desk model card out, when we are triggered. because when we're typically triggered, we lose that ability to really think rationally, don't we?
Right.
Right.
Right, especially as children, it's so much harder. So if you start practicing when you, like you said, you're driving along the road or you are at the playground, even if they, let's say, for example, don't want to go home and want to continue playing, it might be a good opportunity to put the desk model into practice, as
Right.
opposed to when they are very emotional and more triggered and less likely to listen.
Right. And that's where that's where it needs to start, right? If we start with our kids, the next generation's communication is going to be that much better. This isn't a short game. This is a long game. Right? Improving communication, whether it's in your marriage, with your kids, with your teachers, with your coworkers, with your bosses, employees, whatever it may be. This takes a standard, like a culture, and a culture is something that's built over time. It's not something that can just be changed today. We can identify a problem or an issue, or we can say where we are at is good. We can always have room for improvement. This is not about judgment. This is about asking that question, what am I trying to achieve from this interaction or from this relationship? And if it's closeness and togetherness, well, this is one tip and trick on how to get there. But I also encourage, again, for our viewers to go here, and I'm just going to pull this up.
While you're looking for it, Don, I think if they use desk as a tool for self-reflection first when they're feeling emotion and being triggered, it will help to ground them by reflecting on the tool first. So that's also an option.
100%, 100%. And there's so many, and if you want to get in touch with us with your feedback or your suggestions for next year, this is the website. Go to conflictresolutionday.ca. All of the materials that we shared with you today is available. You can see our recorded workshop on Train the Trainer. This is being recorded, so this is going to be available for you to reflect on, review, maybe see with family as well. And if you're looking for past years, if you just go to more, here's 2021's. This is the kindness and communication, and the video, just by clicking on the link, it's available on YouTube as well. Most of the previous ones are. We have 2020 as well is part of that. So we're looking forward. If you guys have more questions about here, past year 2020. And again, this really, we discussed the desk worksheet here quite specifically a couple of years ago. This is back in 2018. So you could see that there is a ton of resources on the website that you can use alone. Like I said, that cognitive bias codex. Man, did I ever start going down the rabbit hole? I was like, one of those 3 a.m. nights going, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And we can still get confused by them. But it's always good to explore. Being wrong on which bias you're at is a great thing, right? Start exploring, start learning more, right? Don't be afraid to be wrong. I think that the fear that we have, and it sometimes shows up in our communication, is that we lose connection. Hopefully these tools give you that feeling that you are able and capable of taking that first step of a journey of 1,000 miles of reconnection. And that's our goal.
And Violet asked a good question that was answered just in the chat, which is, how can we help others see their biases? Which is a really good question. And we'd suggest that in terms of increasing communication, start by asking questions, perhaps asking how they arrived at a certain conclusion or a thought. It can also depend on the type of relationship you have with that person. And obviously, if it's a really close relationship, it might be possible to even ask them if they're perhaps biased in a particular circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at somebody and saying, oh, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance right now. That might not help the situation. And I think it kind of goes back to a question that we have here by JB here. Is it important in relationships to be able to classify or put people in a box? I think what we were trying to show in that last video was there is no one box for anybody. Based off appearance, Yasafina and gender or all these different classifications, eyewear, whatever it may be, Yasafina and I would consistently be in different boxes. Now start talking about our commitment to communication techniques and to volunteer work. Now suddenly we're in the same box. So boxes don't really exist. What we're talking about is reasons for connection as opposed to reasons for disconnection. And if we can jump that divide, we've made wonderful steps forward. We can start taking a look at all these situations from the Cold War to Ireland and the UK, Israel, Palestine. We could start taking a look at every situation and start, when you bring two people out of that group. And I had, I won't say that story, but there's so many opportunities for connection when you change the box, right? And if anything, a box is a chalk outline on the floor. It could be erased, redone, and remade. So boxes are definitely not walls that we surround ourselves with. And there are other videos out there. There's the Heineken Build a Bar commercial, where you have two people of very polarized political views work on a project together and then find an opportunity to build discourse. Those are all opportunities and options that we have to learn more, to be together more as a society, as a community in our culture. One of the great, that channel 2 has another video, and there was one part for me that was really moving. Was it started talking just random strangers or so, and then it started finding all the connections between them. So there was a young lady and an older woman, and their connection was the older woman was actually the midwife at her birth, and she didn't know that. And then it brings somebody else and how they're connected now with the older lady, and then how that person's connected. And there was one an old couple who had survived the Holocaust because they were refugees into Denmark, and a Syrian couple came up, and they were refugees recently. And that experience of both being refugees, regardless of one being Jewish and the other being Muslim, they are now part of the same culture, the new community that they can create. That's what ensuring that we don't put people in boxes means, right? Sometimes it could be helpful, I guess, if we want to find that commonality, right? Oh, so you like the Oilers, hey? I know I'm harping on that one, but you like hockey.
It's a good thing I'm a Flames fan.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. See, another thing in common. There you go. But it's also, well, let's go next time there's a Edmonton Calgary game and enjoy the experience. There's so many opportunities that we have for connection. And if that's the goal that we both share, we feel that. And so therefore there's a new box, which is our relationship. And that's the beauty of it. But folks, I really want to thank you. It looks like some of the comments and questions have come to a close. I really want to thank everybody for being here. This is taking time out of your day to come and be part of this. We really appreciate it. Please forward this the materials, and we're going to have this up in a very short period of time, right? Yes. How long does it typically take for us to upload something to YouTube?
Just a couple of days.
Just a couple of days. Perfect, folks. Thank you on behalf of the Conflict Resolution Day Committee. Thank you. And we look forward to coming up with new materials for you for next year.